right, everybody, welcome to another edition of Blue Collar Real Estate. I'm Ryan Herget.
And I'm Greg Mayo. Hey, today is our first live episode, dude.
I'm a little nervous, I got to be honest. I'm a little nervous about this.
Well, all 6 of the people out there watching right now are excited that we're going live. We got a great topic today, but before we get into the topic, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, right? Very important.
Those are the rules.
Today's episode is brought to you by Fisciolini's Pizza Buffet and Roman Bathhouse.
What?
Pizza Buffet and Roman Bathhouse.
Nice.
Look, if you're going to eat with strangers, why not bathe with them? Am I right? Anyway, dude, so what are we getting into today?
So we're going to talk about everybody's absolutely favorite subject when it comes to real estate, and that is home inspections, right? Everybody gets so excited when we talk about home inspections and going through the inspection process. So we figured we'd just start with a live episode of this and share it with everybody, right?
Dude, hell yeah. Look, everybody loves inspections.
Everybody. I don't
Sellers,
know anybody that doesn't.
buyers, agents, contractors, lenders. Who doesn't love a home inspection?
That's it. That's it. So we're going to dive into inspections. We're going to talk about topics such as why do you need one? What are the things that maybe you can ask a seller to fix if you're a buyer? What are the things that maybe you can tell a buyer to take a hike on if you're a seller? And really give some tips and some in-depth understanding of maybe how can you avoid some of the challenges that come along with home inspections if maybe you've never been in your crawl space in the last 10 years.
So, and I know most of you haven't. So let's start with this. Why? Why have a home inspection? I'm buying a house. Why do I want a home inspection?
Well, I think it's important because simply put, you don't want to inherit somebody else's problems, right?
True.
You don't want to walk in and now all of a sudden you have to replace a roof or an HVAC system, a big ticket item that you weren't planning on having to take care of. And why not get a third-party expert in there that knows a thing or two about construction, knows a thing or two about what's supposed to happen in a house and maybe what's not quite acceptable in a house, to bring that to your attention in advance.
And the other question is, if I'm buying a house, when do I have a home inspection?
That's huge too, and there's timelines, obviously outlined in a purchase agreement when you're doing that. But I almost want to take a step back to get started, if you're cool if we do that. And let's talk about from a seller's perspective. We're going to hit on all the different perspectives, both from a buyer, a seller, the real estate agent side of things, the contractor side of things today. But I want to start with, maybe you're a seller, okay? You're thinking about maybe, it's fall here in Indianapolis right now, and maybe you're thinking about putting your home on the market next spring. We start hearing that a lot right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things that you can do to maybe preemptively not have to deal with surprises? Once you do get your home sold, a buyer comes in, they're excited, everybody's, all excited, you get the thing sold. Now all of a sudden you run into an inspection surprise that's going to cost somebody a lot of money.
And so we call that a pre-listing inspection. When I ran my own home inspection business, that was a big thing I tried to get realtors to suggest to their clients. And the main benefit of it is there's no surprises now. If I'm selling my house and I pay an inspector or whatever, $400 to come in, they give me a list of things that need to be fixed. They get into that crawl space I've never been in.
No doubt.
Because nobody likes crawl spaces. And then I have the opportunity to have those items fixed. And like you and I were talking about earlier, that opportunity becomes a chance to get things fixed and then to make that part of your listing package.
Absolutely. And why I think that, that can be really important is because, especially in the real estate market that we're in right now, where, if you're buying a house under $250,000 in Indianapolis, the average days on market is less than 30, which means there is so much pressure from a buyer to make decisions quickly. I mean, it's not like the days past where, you could go out and look at a house and then come back, bring mom and dad maybe, or bring your contractor buddy. You just don't simply have that luxury anymore because home goes on the market. Now all of a sudden you've got 3 offers on it the first weekend, and buyers are so forced to make decisions quickly, and they get all excited about it. Their offer gets accepted, but then all of a sudden they feel pressured. They feel like, oh my gosh, we had to rush into this decision 2 or 3 days after that initial excitement wears off, and now all of a sudden they're kind of just waiting for the hammer to fall, like what's going to go wrong. And now 1 or 2 small things that happen in inspection kind of compounds the problem when especially they felt pressure to make a decision to begin with and maybe pay more money than they had to, so to speak.
Well, yeah, and so now to alleviate that, you have the pre-listing inspection. Now let's say I'm a buyer, I'm going to look at a house, and my agent, you're my agent today, Ryan. My agent says...
You picked a good one, by the way.
Yeah, I really did. I'm surprised I was able to get an appointment with this guy. But my agent says, okay, we're going to go look at this house at 123 Main Street. Now, they've already had an inspection done. So not only did they fix A, B, C, and D, whatever, but we know the roof is 11 years old, the furnace is 9 years old, and has been serviced annually. We know that the water heater is 3 years old. You go down this list, and now as the buyer, I've got a little more comfort and peace of mind in offering on this house quickly, as you said.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of that guesswork and uncertainty is already alleviated for me.
Absolutely. And where I think a lot of sellers maybe are reluctant to do that is, they don't want to, know necessarily that there's a problem. They don't want to have to spend money on something until it, they absolutely have to. But the challenge that, we experience from a seller's perspective is, buyers, you're not going to get away from a problem that exists in your crawl space. You're not going to get away from a problem that exists in your attic, especially if you've not been up there in a handful of years. And I've dealt with this more than I care to deal with this year, but crawl spaces have been my Achilles heel this year when it comes to real estate inspections. And it's foundation problems. It's, water getting in there, which ultimately leads to, everybody's favorite word, mold. And it's challenging to deal with, and it creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of pressure. And a lot of times, if you can just get down in that crawl space or pop your head in that attic or hire somebody to get up on your roof if you don't like to do such things, having a clear understanding of what you're working with before you get started is going to help alleviate the concern or potentially your deal blowing up 2 weeks after you've got your house sold because now a buyer's scared. Nobody wants to deal with that fear, and simply having an inspector out there pop their head in, and hopefully there isn't a problem. But if there is, let's deal with that up front. So that way you don't have to put your home back on the market, and then you avoid, or, you miss out when you put your home back on the market of, that initial excitement. And now you're not going to get 10 more offers on that house because now it's kind of like a used car.
It's psychologically affected.
Well, I'm not going to go that far yet. But the point is a seller can really put themselves in a much more, confident position when they go through the process of selling, knowing that they're not going to run into a surprise at that point because they've done the dirty work up front. They paid somebody $300 or $400 to just come in, tell them what they're actually dealing with. And at that point, when they get their home sold, they've got the absolute confidence that this thing's going to get to the closing table. The buyer's going to be happy. The seller's going to walk away with more money in their pocket oftentimes because they didn't have to, renegotiate because of all these inspection items that maybe scared the buyer away.
Well, and let's stop for a minute and let's pause. And I want to talk for just a second about what the hell is a home inspector?
Yep.
How does a home inspector come to be a home inspector? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about that. Look, I was a licensed home inspector before I became an agent, and I had a lot of construction experience before I ever started in the inspection world. But, and let's look at, and I've had a real estate license. I went through those classes, took those tests. At one point, I carried over 30 computer certifications when I was in the IT business years and years ago. Well, I'll just say getting my home inspection license was one of the most difficult things I ever did.
Okay.
And I say that to say I ain't smart. No, I say that to say a home inspector goes through a process to become a licensed inspector.
Yep.
So having your cousin Bob come over on the weekend and inspect your home because he doesn't have anything better to do and he'll do it for a case of beer and a pizza, that's not the same as having a licensed home inspector. A licensed home inspector will spend a couple hours at least going through your home, looking at the physical systems of your home. They're going to look at structural issues. They're going to look in the crawl, look in the attic, get on the roof. They're going to look at the exterior. They're going to look at electrical, plumbing, HVAC, the whole kit and caboodle. And they produce a 30 to 50-page report. And I just felt like it was important to say all that because I want people to understand when you hire a licensed home inspector, and just like anything else, not all of them are fantastic at their job.
Sure.
But there is a threshold of professional understanding and knowledge that they have to meet before they can claim to be a licensed home inspector.
Yeah.
Yep. So when you're hiring somebody, you're spending $350, $400 on an inspection. You are paying for that expertise.
Yep.
They are going to know your home better than anybody else that's going to look at it probably.
I would agree with that. And so, we've talked about, the importance of maybe getting an inspection done before you put your home on the market to alleviate those problems. And when I've done that in the past, I can 1,000% attest that it does. It makes the entire process go infinitely smoother. And I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, but I'm saying if you've not been in your crawl space in the last 10 years, spend the money because you don't know what's happened down there. You don't know if there's a rodent down there. You don't know if there's, maybe just a little bit of discoloration on your floor joists. Pop your head in the attic. Take the time up front to do your due diligence so that way you're not walking into a problem. You're not going to have a surprise that's going to scare, perhaps a first-time home buyer away.
Right.
That is just not prepared to deal with that. And with that being said, let's kind of shift to the buyer's perspective. When you buy a house, how much time do you have to get an inspection, and what is an inspection for, and what is it not for? Because I think that's also, it gets a little convoluted sometimes, is, an inspector is going to come in and I tell people this all the time. They're going to come in and literally tell you that this cabinet hinge is crooked. That's what you're paying them to do, is tell you everything that's not perfect with that house,
right,
everything that doesn't meet today's building code in that house. But when you're buying a resale home, you're not necessarily going to ask the seller to fix that cabinet hinge. You're not going to ask them to, fix a tear in the vinyl flooring in the kitchen. That's not what an inspection's for. What are some of the things that, as a buyer, Greg, they really need to understand? Here's what an inspection's for. Here's what we can reasonably ask a seller to take care of for us if we do run into a problem. And what are some of the things, I just mentioned a couple of them, but what are maybe a few other things that maybe it's like, no, this is not something a seller's going to fix?
Well, the first thing I want to mention, and what I tell my clients, and what I told people when I was an inspector, what I told my clients, we're looking for structural issues, safety issues, or health issues.
Yep.
The cabinet hinge, that's a great example. We're not going to ask them to fix that. I say as an agent now. Now, from a timetable standpoint, let's back up on that for a minute, because I have been putting, for the entire time I've been in this business, 14 or 15 days from the time, on the purchase agreement, from the time the offer is accepted until inspection. Well, my wife, who's a mortgage loan officer, her and I were talking about that the other day, and she said, you need to start putting 10 days.
True.
Because it slows us down on the lender side. So 10 to 15 days, right? And I would encourage you, and if you're a home buyer or a seller right now for that matter, I'm talking directly to you, have your agent go over the entire purchase agreement with you. So, because there's a lot of information in there that as agents, we kind of glaze over because we're used to seeing it. Don't just sign it, digi-sign on your phone with your thumb. Actually read the thing and look at it, because there's stuff like that in it. So you got 10 or 15 days to get the inspection done. The inspector is going to point out everything. As a buyer and your agent, you're going to ask for, again, safety, structural, health. One example I want to use is roofs. And you and I have run into this 100 times. The inspector will say roof is at or near the end of its usable life, meaning a 20-year-old roof, it's 18 years old, say.
Yep.
Now, a lot of buyers will see that and go, okay, we need to ask them to replace the roof. Well, you can't.
Yeah.
If it's not leaking, it's not a defect. And if it is leaking, then their only obligation the seller has is to repair what's leaking.
Correct.
So a $300 to $500 repair job by a roofing contractor, right? Not an $8,000 roof.
Yep.
And to get that through people's heads is virtually impossible. Once they get in their mind, they have to have a new roof.
Well, and I think from a buyer standpoint, it's scary because nobody wants to, purchase a new home and then know that they're going to have an $8,000 bill, a year later on. That's scary for anybody. However, you're also buying a used home. Okay. When you buy a used car, you're not going to go in there and say, you know what, this thing needs a new engine because you got 150,000 miles on it. That's not how it works.
Right.
It needs to be maintained. It needs to be serviced, but that's also part of buying a resale home. But I think one of the things that really scares a lot of buyers is truly, their real estate agent doesn't necessarily always take the time to prepare them what an inspection is and what it's not. I always tell people, when we get an inspection, we're going to get a 40 to 60 page report truly telling you everything that's not perfect about this house, which is awesome. That's what you want going in. You want to know everything that you're walking into. So again, that way you're not inheriting somebody else's, problems or a surprise that you don't want to, that you didn't know about. However, it's for those major items. And I always like to say it's for the roof, the foundation, the plumbing, the electrical, the structural, switching over to the health, mold, radon, asbestos, termites. That's what you're looking for. And if there's anything wrong like that, you have every opportunity. It's in the purchase agreement and under major defects to ask the seller to remedy those items. Or if not, you get your money back and you go find a new house. But again, buyers get scared because if they're not told that you're going to get a 70-page report back saying, here's everything that's wrong, you don't get to ask the seller to make that house brand new and perfect. If you want to do that, let's go over to a new home builder and let's build a brand new house, because you do get that luxury. You get to go through and put little dots on everything that's not perfect, every scuff on the wall. Yep. You do get that luxury. And if that's what's important to you, then yeah, let's go talk about building a new home. But that being said, when you're buying a resale home, that's just simply not the case. So go ahead.
And I always preface with my clients and make sure they understand before we get the report, look, at least half of this report, literally, is CYA verbiage, right? Cover your backside verbiage that the inspector puts in there, or that's preloaded to make sure they don't get sued, because everybody's sue happy in our culture now.
Sure.
So a typical home inspection, it's like I said, it's about $350, $400.
Yep.
Right? There's also other items you can get, and I think we should cover them.
And this is huge because I unfortunately was a part of one of these the hard way. I learned this the hard way with one of my buyers, unfortunately. I was inexperienced as a real estate agent. I'm going back to, I think this was 2005 or 6. This is a long, long time ago now, but I'd helped a buyer with a home in Broad Ripple. Okay, Broad Ripple, these homes were built in the 20s.
I know where you're going with
20s
this.
and 30s, et cetera. Okay, and, you just get a normal home inspection, right? I thought I was doing a good job by just, I got them connected with a really good inspector at the time. And, we did our inspection. We got through it. There was a few minor items that came up, but ultimately nothing major. Well, until about, I think it was 8 or 9 months later, it was just getting cold out. Oh my gosh, this was a terrible experience for me. But it was just getting cold out. And now all of a sudden they had sewer problems. Okay. They had just bought this house, young first-time home buyer, and now they had sewer problems. Well, we didn't think, and I didn't think as a real estate agent at the time, to educate them on maybe you should hire somebody to do a sewer scope. What ended up happening is the main sewer line going out to the house, a tree root had just simply gone through it, and the entire sewer line was just mainly disintegrated anyway. I mean, this thing probably hadn't been touched since 1922 or whenever the home was built. I think it was 26, actually. Long story short, they ended up having almost a $15,000 unexpected surprise, and I felt absolutely horrible. And, thankfully they weren't too upset with me, and Guido didn't come over and visit me that night. But the point was, they inherited that surprise, and I feel terrible having been a part of that and not having educated them. And that's not something you want to have anybody go through. So let's really dive into maybe what are those add-on items that a general home inspection isn't necessarily going to cover. We just mentioned the first one, getting a sewer scope done. They actually literally run a camera through. You can watch the dude do it or a gal do it, and they run it through, and you can see the entire thing. You see if there's any problems. You see if there's any penetrations. You see if there's anything that needs to be addressed, and that's a major defect. That's something you can ask the seller to remedy up front.
Well, and on that, let's hold there for just a second, because if your house was built in the last 10 years, especially, you're going to have PVC pipe running all the way out, and you're not going to probably have that problem.
Sure.
What we're talking about is older homes, like you're talking about the one in Broad Ripple. I had one off 46, and we'll call it Evanston, which I hate that term. But anyway, similar situation. So back then, houses were made with the drain lines were about this wide. If you're watching, about this way. I caught a fish. And they were made out of clay, terracotta. And so there was a bell end and a insert end, and they just went together in pieces. So when you're talking about a tree root getting in the middle, it was real easy for them to do. People planted trees back then that are now, this big around. Those older homes are the ones that are super important to have the sewer scope done. And a lot of inspection companies are now offering it internally as an add-on service.
Yeah. Because
it's become a big thing. So the next thing is radon.
Okay, we hear this a lot, okay? I know what radon is, you know what radon is, but it's not something that, you're taught in school. You're not even generally, made aware of it until the time comes to have an inspection. So let's start with what is radon, and then secondly, why is it important to test for it? How do you test for it? What's it cost, et cetera?
Radon is like iocane powder. Odorless, colorless, dissolves instantly in water, for you Princess Bride fans out there. The radon's a gas naturally occurring in the ground, but it's a radioactive gas and has been found in lab tests to cause cancer.
Yeah.
That's the big buzz about it. And the EPA has set standards for what is an acceptable level of radon in your home.
Yep. And it's simply a matter of paying the inspector an extra 50 or 65 bucks or whatever they happen to charge, but it's not expensive. But again, if I'm not mistaken, I believe radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the country behind cigarette smoking. And it's not something that is under every house, but it just naturally occurs in the ground, and there's nothing you can do about it except install a radon mitigation system, which just circulates the air, gets that gas outside, so it's not a safety hazard. But again, if you don't know to inspect for it, then you're putting your family in potentially a safety hazard.
And the way they inspect that, they install most of them now install a machine that takes a reading every hour, right, for 48 hours, and then they tell you your level of radon. If you have to have it mitigated, a company that comes in and puts a system in is likely going to be between $800 and $1,100.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not an expensive system, but it's something that needs to be inspected for. And so many real estate agents will say, well, if your home's not on a crawl space or a basement, then you don't have to worry about it. But I disagree with that. I'm going through a situation right now where we did one on a crawl space, or I'm sorry, on a slab, and it still has radon. It wasn't exceedingly high, but it came back at 12.4, I think, and the acceptable level is 4.0. And it's just, you don't know where it's going to form in the ground, and you don't know how it's going to find its way up. And I encourage everybody, it's a very inexpensive insurance policy, if you will, just to make sure that you're keeping your family safe. So we've talked about sewer scopes. We've talked about the importance of a radon addition. What are a couple other ones, Greg, that maybe people should add on to that general home inspection?
My absolute favorite, termite.
Termite.
Now, if you're doing a VA loan, you have to have a termite inspection.
Yep.
And the seller has to pay for it. Which is something I learned the hard way. But anyway, termites and other wood-destroying organisms, right? If you're a home inspector, that's a separate test. Mm-hmm. Here you take it through the Indiana State Chemist at Purdue. But we're looking for critters that eat the wood in your house.
Yeah, and again, if your home's on a crawl space, the sill plate that goes between the foundation block and where they start building a house at, that's one of the areas where I've seen it. And a lot of times also with homes that have maybe wood burning fireplaces, people don't keep the wood inside, obviously. But a mistake I see all the time is people will line up a bunch of firewood right next to their house. Well, that's a perfect feeding harbor for termites to get in, and once they're there, it's a lot easier for them to get inside your home at that point. So having a simple termite inspection done, again, we're talking $50, right? We're not talking a huge expense, but again, it's another degree of peace of mind that you're going to not inherit a big problem with your home.
And then if you're doing a rural property, you obviously want to have the well water tested. Yep. For bacteria and other stuff. You also want to have the septic system tested.
That's another huge challenge that people encounter.
And I got a great story. When I was a home inspector, we used to do a dye test. Mm-hmm. You put this brightly colored dye in the toilet, flush it, run all the plumbing, and then try to figure out where it came out, right? Yep. You were trying to determine if there were any leaks, where the septic field was. Well, anyway, I was at a house down in southern Indiana, and I had ran the dye, half a gallon, nothing. So I ran the rest of it. Still nothing. And it was snow. There's 4 inches of snow on the ground. I'm walking around the yard trying to find it, and I finally look over here in a ditch that runs alongside the road. That's where it was dumping out.
Oh, wow.
Years ago, we didn't understand septic technology like we do now. Mm-hmm. In fact, even the system you would put in 20 years ago would not pass code in most municipalities now. Mm-hmm. That dye test, by the way, is not comprehensive enough. You need to have a septic company come out, pay them to inspect the tank, the system, and decide if it's going to need repairs, because the new septic system can cost $12,000 to $15,000.
So what's an inspection on that septic cost? We've talked about some of the costs. Sewer scopes usually around $150, radon's $50, $75, termites around $50. A well test is around $50, $75 or so to get that done. I know a septic inspection is a little bit more expensive. What can somebody reasonably expect to pay for a separate septic inspection?
You can get one done for a couple $100. Mm-hmm. Some are a little cheaper, some a little more. The key is you want to make sure it's a septic person, a septic company,
right?
That knows what they're going to be looking at, right?
Well, and I know most of the home inspectors that I've worked with, and I know you have as well, they actually don't do the septic inspection themselves. They bring out a third-party company to do that septic inspection,
right?
Because it is such a specialized area of the house.
Well, and getting in a septic tank's a crappy job. So then a few other things to consider, depending on the age of your home and whatever. Mold-based paint. It's a new thing sweeping the nation.
It's becoming very popular right here.
Mold, lead-based paint, asbestos, again, depending on the age of the home.
Right.
And if your inspector sees something that might be lead paint, that might be mold, that might be asbestos, then at that point you would call in a specialist to do those additional tests.
No doubt. So we've talked about a lot of the additions. We've talked about maybe dealing with the inspection if you're a buyer, if you're a seller. One of the things we haven't really talked about yet is, and again, this happens. We're all human beings, and we've all made mistakes from time to time, and we've all just simply overlooked things. But there's things that an inspector can't do as well. Okay, an inspector's not going to tear your walls down. They're not going to poke a hole in the wall to see what's going on behind the walls. They can't do that. A seller's not going to allow them to do that. And so what are some of the things that maybe an inspection may miss that are not necessarily part of a general inspection, Greg?
Well, and let me address that for just a second, because the law does not allow inspectors to move anything.
True.
If you've got an on-wall sitting in front of an outlet, as an inspector, I can't test that outlet because I can't move your furniture. I can't move a piece of insulation to see what's behind that. So I think that's important to note too. But inspectors, so they can miss electrical problems by not being able to get to the outlets. I looked at a crawl space once. The hatch was inside the house, and I popped the hatch and looked down, and there were electrical wires laying all over the ground in standing water.
Oh, that sounds safe.
So I noted not inspecting the crawl space because I don't want to die. Turns out the homeowner had done a bunch of wiring himself, did something to the circuit. The sump pump was on, it stopped working. I'll go back and inspect it for a reinspect charge. But again, I'm not doing that. Now, the inspector should note I didn't do that.
Absolutely.
If it's a super steep roof, I didn't walk anything over an 812 pitch. And pitch is this, if you're looking. Well, your roof shouldn't do this.
Just got to get you some cougar paws.
Anyway, I didn't walk over an 812. Now, on the other end of that, if you've got a 2 or 312, a really low pitch roof, I may not be able to access the attic.
The attic, absolutely.
The attic hatch in older homes is sometimes too small for somebody as wide as me to get up in them. Again, it's just about noting that kind of stuff that I wasn't able to check. So to just leave it off is a no-no. But to miss it because you weren't able to get to it, that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
So if you're selling your house and the inspector's coming, don't try to hide stuff. Don't have excessive stuff piled up in a room, boxes all around the perimeter or whatever. An inspector needs to be able to get to the windows, the outlets, switches, under sink plumbing to look at it. But even with that, there are over 300 items you inspect during a home inspection.
Yep.
Every inspector, like you said, is going to miss stuff. Which one misses what? I mean, that's another thing. Now, let's say they miss something because nobody's perfect.
Sure.
You have to decide as the buyer how big of a deal that is. If they miss something and you can prove gross negligence, now you get into the whole world of, do we pursue legal action? Most inspectors have the same insurance we do, E&O, errors and omissions, meaning it's insurance. So if I forget something or miss something and you sue me, my insurance company pays. When I was an inspector, there were a lot of people in the industry. It was split about half and half. Half of them had it, half of them didn't. The half that didn't get it because they thought that looked like easy money for somebody's lawyer. The half that did wanted the added protection. So it's really up to you as an inspector. And that's the other thing we need to talk about. So how do you know you're hiring a reputable one?
That's where I wanted to go next. So I appreciate you bringing that up. What are the things, Greg, and again, you've been an inspector. I've been doing this, for a long, long time. What are some of the things that really, certify that this is the right inspection company to do the job? What are maybe some questions that a buyer or a seller, when they're hiring somebody to come out and inspect their home, what are some of the questions that maybe they need to ask, due diligence that they need to do to make sure that they're hiring the right person to get this job done right for them?
Just like hiring a contractor, find people that have used this inspector.
Okay, so you're looking for referrals. You're looking for possibly good reviews on Google or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe their Facebook page.
Okay.
Your realtor should give you a list of 3 inspectors as possibilities. But you and I know, you don't know what kind of relationship they have. Maybe it's a buddy and they're trying to throw them some business. So third-party reviews are definitely a way to go. I typically send clients to a couple of different large national companies now for inspections. I prefer to hire local people wherever I can.
Yeah.
But this one company in particular, Rick, we'll talk later, I call them the Great Clips of home inspections. Whatever guy they send out to my property to inspect, I'm going to get the same inspection because they're all trained the same.
And that's what's important, I think, is, and again, I love the entrepreneur. I love the guy who's just getting started with his inspection business, or maybe is still, been doing it for a long time and doing it on his own. But you have to realize as a buyer or a seller that there's a degree of risk associated with that. What type of training has this person had?
Right.
Are they good at it because they said they're good at it, or have they been through a certified training process that makes sure that they know? I know one of the inspection companies that I use all the time, he doesn't hire guys that have been contractors or previous inspectors. He hires people from outside the industry so he can train them on the right way to do a home inspection. And he's grown his business to one of the largest home inspection companies in the state now because he takes that approach. He believes so much in training. He believes in so much in making sure that guys know how to do the job the right way. So that way he gets consistent, predictable results. And in turn, he's got a bunch of happy customers. And that's why he's continued to grow his business as he has.
Right. And again, I'm not opposed to the one-off independent guy or gal. If we were in Rockford, Illinois, my cousin owns and operates a home inspection business. He's phenomenal. I know him. I know he's detail-oriented. I know he's not going to miss stuff. I know he cares about the process and the people on the other end, my buyers. So I'd hire him if I'm in Rockford, but I'm not, so I can't.
So you've got to find somebody that has the proper training and understanding how to get this done right the first time. Greg, I think we've pretty much exhausted the topic of home inspections. So
no, we've just begun.
We've not just begun. So that's all we've got for this edition of Real Stories of Success. No, that's my other podcast that I do.
Wow.
This is Blue Collar Real Estate. I'm like a trader right now. Oh, my gosh. Got producer Jason back there making fun of me now.
Because here on Blue Collar Real Estate, we don't believe in success.
No, that's not true at all. We believe in epic success here.
But hey, don't forget the name like Ryan did, but also don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
Now, and I think that's all we've got for this time, but we really appreciate everybody tuning in this week. And until next week, that is it for Blue Collar Real Estate. We hope everybody enjoys the weekend and has a great day. That was easy for me to say.
It was easy for you to say. And quick note, tomorrow, Indy 11, downtown at the Mike. Semifinals, Eastern Conference, USL. Go team.
Make it happen.
Right on. Have a good week, guys.